Hey everyone. I'd like to spend some time initially focusing on SaaS Security overview, essentially what all do we deliver to our customers as part of SaaS Security. And then we'll delve into some of the recently delivered features that we did just within the last quarter. And then we will pick maybe 3 features that I mentioned earlier. And towards the end, I'll try to leave at least 15 minutes for Q&A so that we at least have time for all of us to answer any questions that you may have. Along the way, if you have any questions, kindly post them in the chat window or the Q&A section, sorry, so that we are aware of the questions and we'll be happy to address them either as we go or towards the end of the webinar. Thank you so much. Very quickly, I don't think this sort of should be surprising to anyone. The entire modern businesses just runs on SaaS. Almost anything and everything today that we do happens within the SaaS environment. The usage has exploded, which is the reason why attackers also see this becoming a very important vector, if you may, for them to be able to ultimately get access to, let's say, data, plus compromise customers in some ways, and then making sure that they could be held to ransom and other things as well. Since the usage has exploded, it ends up creating new attack targets and then triggering more attacks as well from the attackers is what we have seen and learned from our environments. What we believe is overall, any SaaS security vendor that you choose, again, this could be independent of Palo Alto Networks as well, but thank you for choosing us. When we think about SaaS security, we believe any platform that you end up choosing, this platform should be able to deliver all of these 4 critical pillars, if you may. Industry-leading visibility and control, and this is not just visibility and control on the network side as well, but it could be app discovery related to the marketplace of apps and other places, environments as well. Comprehensive security posture. So this means ensuring that you ensure that the app themselves are configured in the most secure way. So how is the posture of this particular app from the security perspective, and making sure that they are all configured correctly. The marketplace that those apps have, if you think about it, Salesforce is no longer Salesforce. It has its own app exchange, and in that app exchange, there are hundreds of different apps. Attackers have realized that while it might be extremely hard, so let's take Palo Alto Networks, while it might be extremely hard to breach Palo Alto Networks, Palo Alto does have, let's say, this small 100-employee company app deployed via its marketplace. And so if I were to able to compromise this small 100-employee company, which has like a small spend in security, then I can potentially get access to Palo Alto Networks data through the marketplace as well. So that's what we are seeing attackers evolving, if you may. The whole concept of supply chain, if you've heard that term in the past, typically it's from the open source community, but in some way it's applicable on the SaaS side as well. And then if the configuration changes, making sure that we prevent those configurations in the first place. Enterprise grade data security. So last, but I mean, if you think about it, DLP sort of is your last layer of defense. Like you want to make sure you have a defense in-depth approach. You're trying to avoid attackers getting in through different layers. And then eventually, even if they potentially get access to the data, making sure that the data does not go outside the environment, or that data is tagged properly, labeled properly, classified properly, to ensure that there's no way that this data can leave your environment, if you may. And then last but not the least, security. Sort of security is becoming fundamental, if you may. So Palo Alto's core DNA is in security. We have spent a lot of research, and we continue to do a lot of research in this environment or in this area. Our Wildfire is one of the most evolved sandbox solutions that you see out there, which comes integrated and included in our SaaS security offering. It prevents evasive malware and phishing attacks as well. And then make sure that we provide that consistent protection, be it network, be it SaaS, be it any other environment as well. We recently also delivered behavioral analytics capability, which sort of we call it the threats feature, if you may, to identify if there are any compromised accounts or even malicious insiders that might be trying to exfiltrate your data or perform any nefarious activities within your SaaS environments. So these are all the capabilities that we expect any modern SaaS security solution should be able to deliver and be able to meet some of the enterprise needs as well. I'll quickly delve into each, like how this sort of comes together. Again, we are part, SaaS and DLP sort of are part of our overall security offering to our customers, if you may. And this is how it integrates into your existing network security stack. So you could have either next generation firewalls, or you could have Prisma SASE sort of deployed. And then what happens is we are part of that cloud delivered security services, where some of these other services, as you see, are also present. But SaaS and DLP are sort of what focuses and bridges this gap into our overall network security portfolio, if you may. In terms of like the integrated architecture, how do things look like? You could have employees sitting either at home, or it could be branches, or it could be headquarters, any location, if you may. Their traffic could be going either through the next generation firewall, or their traffic could be going through the Prisma access, depending on when they're remote or in office, if you may. And then what happens is our SaaS security is typically delivered from the cloud environments. The SaaS inline capabilities does rely on the CDL, Cortex Data Lake. It's also getting rebranded to Strata Log Service, if I'm not wrong, SLS service. This is where we get the entire visibility, analysis, and granular control from both of these environments, writing into CDL, which we integrate with, and we pull all of this information. And then customers get all of that visibility, and then they are able to perform write functions into these inline enforcement points to say, hey, these particular applications or this upload of this sensitive information essentially gets blocked, or any application that sort of 8 risk or higher sort of should get blocked as well. And then for the API section, which is we build connectors and connect directly into these sanctioned SaaS environments. We provide that visibility and control of all the configurations, all the data being present in your environment. So sort of provide that posture management as well as data security management in that particular environment, if you may. In terms of those 4 individual pillars that I spoke about, visibility and control of all SaaS usage, this is what our product essentially looks like. You can gain visibility into all of your SaaS environment across the enterprise, and then sort of reduce the risk being introduced by those shadow IP applications. Performs tons of different capabilities, as sort of mentioned over here. I'll go through them quickly. Data security, again, you need sort of important app coverage. You need extremely high quality data detection. You need, like, all of the legacy vendors were built, let's say, for databases and structured data, if you may. Today, a lot of work happens in collaborative apps like Slack and Teams. You want to make sure that those hard to detect secrets, like if I post a message like, hey, can you share the Salesforce username and password in Slack? And then the person responds by saying, here you go, here are the credentials. We want to make sure that we are able to scan all of those messages and be able to remove them from your collaborative environments as well. And then last but not the least, we also perform user-led remediation. We all understand that the operations team can only deliver so much, and more alerts are getting generated every single day. So we want to make sure that the security teams can leverage end user-led remediation as well. Certain cases you can remediate through policy. Other cases where you're not 100% sure, you can sort of engage or involve the user to help take that decision. And then if they want to, they can go through. If they're not, they don't want to go through, but at least that sort of gets logged as well. As well as posture security management to make sure that you look at the configuration, not just that, through marketplace as well, and then be able to do that. Last but not the least, advanced threats as well. All right, I'll quickly now pivot into some of the recently delivered features. And I like to focus only on the last 3 months. So when I say Q3 FY24, this is the time frame starting from Feb, March, and April. So those are the 3 months. And all of these capabilities are highlighted on our SaaS Security help documentation page as well, where we highlight the most recently released features. So if you were to go to those web pages, and I'll make sure that I provide link here as well for future reference, that if you go to those pages, you'll be able to see these features highlighted in either the Feb or the March or the April delivered capabilities. We'd like to typically divide the feature into three areas. So over here, it's key features, sort of newer things, if you may, that we might have introduced, some of the modernization that we keep on doing to our platform. It's something that comes up pretty often. Platform is something that we as a company are focusing on as well. So we want to make sure that we're continuously improving on that. And then last but not the least, since we are SaaS Security, we want to make sure that we continue to do our strategic integrations to make sure that we are able to deliver a lot of value to our customers. Just highlighting the 9 features here, if you may, within the last quarter that we delivered. Identity security, I'll skip because we'll go deep dive into that, along with ML-based behavior threats as well. So this is also something, both of these I'll deep dive into. Support for 300 plus Gen AI apps. So I'm pretty sure if you are in any board meeting of lately, Gen AI apps is top of mind almost for everyone. We had a very big announcement and launch yesterday as well, calling Precision AI, to make sure that we are able to identify and then secure Gen AI adoption of your employees in your environment. As part or as a precursor to that, if you may, we already added support for 300 plus Gen AI apps. So if you're using your SaaS inline capabilities, by the way, the features are also based on the different SaaS security product lines we have. We have API capabilities, we have inline capabilities, as well as we have SSPM capabilities. For SaaS inline, we've added 300 plus Gen AI apps already to be able to see like those Gen AI apps getting used in your environment, get complete visibility, see what risks are associated with those Gen AI apps, see what are the different attributes that we have captured with respect to AI for those apps as well in your environment. So that's on the key features side. On the platform side, on posture security, again, we keep on releasing a bunch of different features which helps us get to enterprise readiness as well as modernizing our platform. You can export our compliance reports. You can also consume information for posture security through syslog, so that now if you use some sort of syslog receiver, you're able to pull that information from our side. We've also released public APIs for posture security, so you can also consume information not just via syslog, but via APIs as well. And last but not the least, you can also configure like custom roles in order to ensure that this admin is potentially only having access to posture security, but maybe nothing else within posture security as well, potentially only the configurations piece or only the interconnected SaaS piece and nothing else. For the interconnected SaaS, this is for this product area for us, gives visibility into those apps or those marketplace environments. So not imagine, but Slack, Office 365, Google, Salesforce, these are like app platforms, if you may. Almost all of them have marketplaces. You have different apps being connected via marketplaces to these core SaaS applications. We call that feature as interconnected SaaS, where SaaS is talking to this core SaaS platform. And we've already released features where we give you inventory visibility, as well as reporting for all of these apps that are connected by the marketplaces. But we now also give additional capabilities, like you can now filter using access scopes. You can also see what apps are private or public apps in terms of whether the app that is connected, is that published within the marketplace, or is that a private app that is built potentially just by your environment or just by your organization, and then customers or users subscribing to those apps. Last but not the least, we sort of have feature parity as well. SCM is nothing but Strata Cloud Manager. As Kuram already mentioned, like all of our customers are getting transitioned to this Strata Cloud Manager as well. And so there are, if you have been an existing SaaS API customer for some period of time, you might be using the older legacy console, but we continue to build more and more features into this Strata Cloud Manager. There were certain features which were not present in the new console, but were present in the old console. So we are slowly and steadily fixing on those things. I would say 95% plus were already fixed, along with this capability for performing selective scanning capabilities. So now selective scanning, you can ensure that you can configure only particular things get scanned using SaaS API from Palo Alto Networks. So that capability was present in the legacy console, is now added in Strata Cloud Manager as well, if you may. That's on the platform side. And then last but not the least, strategic integrations. On the interconnected SaaS, Salesforce was added, Salesforce App Marketplace or Salesforce App Exchange, as Salesforce calls it, to see all of those different connected apps, as well as the users using those apps has been added to our SaaS Security posture management product area. So that was an important integration for us in order to make sure that we continue to deliver value to our customers. On the inline side, we have now integrated with our CIE. CIE is Cloud Identity Engine. This is a free service from Palo Alto Networks. So if you haven't used CIE, highly encourage using it. It gives you a lot more visibility, as well as it allows you to use other features, if you may, from CIE. And so for our customers that were already leveraging CIE, now when they are planning to configure those SaaS inline policies, they would be able to leverage the CIE CDUG group as well, dynamic user groups, or any other capabilities that CIE provides with them. And then last, for Microsoft data labeling, again, I'll go in sort of deep dive into that as well as a focus on one of the features. I'll take a quick pause. Any questions? Do you want me to answer?
No, let's take the proceed. Let's take
questions
the question
towards the end.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do that with them. Perfect. So starting with identity security. So again, I'd like to focus on what problems we are hearing from our customers, in some way what the long-term solution looks like, and then bringing it to here's what has been recently delivered, so that you sort of get not just like the short-term deliverable that we have performed, but also long-term, which direction are we heading towards, if you may. So when if you look at the before world, right, like in some ways before the whole Oktas or IDPs came into existence, identities were sort of centralized. In some way they were good as well, because the security team had full visibility and control on everything associated to authentication and authorization, right? So everything was just being done within the Active Directory. Obviously, with the onset of IDPs, a lot more features and other things got introduced, but at the same time, interesting security vectors also got introduced. So now authentication or identity security, it's not just in one place, but it's distributed across your Active Directory, it's distributed across your IDPs, and last but not the least, it's also distributed across your SaaS applications. What do I mean by that? In most cases today, customers do end up creating, let's say, service accounts or local accounts, which might be present just within these SaaS environments, which are not even present within your IDPs or even your AD for that matter. Right? So your identity security now needs to span across all these three different environments, and you need to make sure that you have this complete visibility to go in that direction. And what we're seeing is a lot of attacks that have happened recently. If you may, like if you might have heard about the Okta breach also that happened some time back. It happened because of a service account that was provisioned, and then like no one was using it. It was never removed until an attacker got their hands on it, and then they were able to leverage that service account to be able to get inside that environment. So those sort of things continue to happen because of these SaaS environments, identity sort of remaining locally within these SaaS environments. What we're seeing is the legacy security solutions don't fit the bill, because now your rules, permissions, everything are sort of configured in different places. Your local accounts or service accounts that are present within your SaaS environments, some customers are not even aware that they are present. Even when they're aware, in some ways they're becoming unmanageable because they get created on the fly without the central InfoSec team even being aware of certain things, and no tools sort of providing that visibility. And then like configuration or other changes just continue to happen, right? In the sense, business needs to work as fast as possible. Let's say a Salesforce admin is there. They're typically asked, hey, can you create an automation? We need to pull some reports automatically. Or can you create sort of this local account? So that way we are able to do this in an automated manner. A lot of those things continue to happen without understanding the security implications of those changes happening within those SaaS environments, if you may. And what we're saying is there are no existing solutions that provide an end-to-end visibility of all of these things happening within the SaaS environment. Like just to give you a small example, like how this modern SaaS ecosystem is creating the challenges. Imagine you have users. Again, these users sort of are correlated with directory, IDP, as well as the app permission. We already see some sort of inconsistency present over here, but let's say somehow this user did get access to the Salesforce application. Again, these users are then creating a service account, and the service account ownership is with the same user, but somehow that is also not something that's easily visible or known to the SaaS admins as well, so that they can deprovision those accounts. They're using these service accounts to pull information automatically from Salesforce, and they might be pushing that information to other SaaS applications, let's say like an Excel sheet in this case, which then are shared with other users in your environment, which may or may not even have access to those SaaS applications in the first place. So these users might not even have access to Salesforce, but still they have access to almost entire Salesforce data, which gets pulled from Salesforce, gets published in these Excel sheets, and then these users have access to the data to this Excel sheet. It's sort of creating this shadow access to this sensitive data, which they do not have access to these sanctioned SaaS applications in the first place. How are we thinking of solving this problem for the long term? Again, we believe this sort of falls into three different pillars. We first of all need to make sure that we have secure SaaS authentication policies. We detect any misconfigurations or any problems that you might have in your identity provider or inside your SaaS applications as well. The other option is you need to have a secure service account management. So whatever service accounts you're creating inside those SaaS applications, you want to make sure that you identify them, you tie them to real users, you monitor usage, and then potentially when those users actually leave, so let's say if I'm leaving the organization tomorrow, I might have asked those 10 service accounts to be created. I potentially could be taking that information with me when I leave the organization. So you need to make sure that either you're rotating those credentials or deprovisioning those service accounts, whatever needs to be done, so that I can no longer compromise those service or use or leverage those service accounts to continue getting access to sensitive data within my environment. And then last but not the least, secure all of these shadow accesses by using some sort of policy for SaaS environment. So we discover unintended access that might have been provided via these sharing of information being pulled from one SaaS application with other users, to make sure that we sort of give that visibility and create a policy to say like the same enforcement or access control that this user had, if they don't have access to Salesforce, they should not even have access to data getting pulled from Salesforce as well. Some sort of those similar capabilities being enforced, if you may. So this is sort of like the long-term direction that we want to go to. Short term, what are we doing? So we are doing something in phase one, specifically focusing on MFA misconfigurations. Again, we spoke about a lot of different things. Specifically for MFA, I don't know if you've heard the recent news about United Healthcare as well. A lot of that did point to some sort of MFA misconfigurations happening in the first phase. So in our phase one, we are focusing explicitly on MFA. The MFA enrollment issues is already something that we are in beta stage already. And then usage is something that will be exposed very quickly as well. So this is something that's present. If any of you are interested, would love to enroll you guys in sort of the beta thing as well. Switching gears now to behavior threats. Again, so we typically get these questions asked like a lot of times at the end of the day, the accounts do get compromised, right? It's safe to assume that somehow, somewhere, attackers have compromised your credentials. This is the reason why you want to go down the path of zero trust access to say, I presume that you are compromised, so I want to make sure that I restrict your access as much as possible. And what we're seeing is these credentials getting compromised and insider threats are real and extremely expensive as well. at the end of the day, we do see these scenarios getting very common, compromises happening in your environment, and making sure that that you perform or you have tools that are able to detect these things, extremely high priority for your environment. Next slide, please. So this sort of arises a need to detect suspicious behavior happening in your environment. Specifically now, when you think about those crown jewel applications, this data is happening or residing within your sanctioned SaaS environments. They want to begin with some of these mission critical SaaS information like customer data or credentials, HR, payroll, source code. Like they want to make sure that they monitor all the activities happening within these environments, and then they are able to see if there's any suspicious activity sort of happening in these environments. And then as boundaries are relaxed, they uncover more information as well, like what are the more risk exits, if you may, they see in this tolerated and unsanctioned environment as well, right? In the sense, obviously the data gets copied over from these sanctioned SaaS applications, but then in most cases, they might be getting pasted or they might be getting pulled into some other different environments. So want to make sure that you're not just monitoring the SaaS application sanctioned SaaS, but you're also monitoring these unsanctioned or tolerated apps as well to see what sort of activities are happening. And then add all of them, you compare one user to other as well, you sort of come up with the risky behavior that you see in your environment. So it's not just about risky users in the first place, it's also about detecting anomalies, right? To see like what's happening on your network, why are things behaving differently, if you may. And last, like overall, it all contributes to more signals. What we believe is in security world, again, one tool by itself can create a lot of noise, can create a lot of signals, but unless all of those things sort of come together and create like a holistic report, that is not something that becomes usable at an individual signal level. So again, as we create more and more signals, we not just have that information within us, but we also push that information to XOR so that you can leverage the holistic picture from our side. Next slide, please. So for that benefit, again, we've introduced this ML power behavior threads, where our whole objective is to detect suspicious activities being present in your environment. So what we do is we have created these default policies based on situations of compromised accounts or malicious insider activities. So think like we've built a new ML models. Compromised accounts behave in a particular way. Whatever those behaviors are, those models mimic those behaviors, and they try to identify whether they see similar behavior happening in activities within your environment. So they sort of focus on that and pull that information. We detect these activities, and then what we do is we provide you visibility along those information. We detect threats as well to sensitive data, such as you could be doing bulk transfers, you could be doing abnormal accesses or malicious activities with sensitive data. Those kind of activities are also being done. And then you can also add these users to watch list to make sure that if certain users are behaving badly, you want to add them to watch list. And we also create incidents so that you can do focused investigations along with LLM-based extremely simple explanations to indicate like, hey, this is what has happened in your environment. This feature is present with our CASB X, which is our cross-platform bundle, CASB Prisma Access bundle, as well as data security or SaaS API, as we used to call it, bundle as well. So if you have any of these three product lines, you should be able to leverage this capability from our side as well. Next slide, please. I don't know, Khurram, if you can play the demo video. You click on it, let's see if it works. And yeah, I can voice over it as well. So as you can see, we do give visibility. You can see all of the risky users present in your environment, along with the risk score on the side. What you can also do is you are able to see if you want to add them to watch list, just simply click that slider. That happens. You can see all the users here. You can filter users for a particular thing as well to see whether they are in watch list or not. So you can just see those watch list enabled users. or you can see all the users in your environment as well, if you may. You do see all of these different policies by situation, whether there is any spike in activity, any bulk activity happening in your environment, and then whether those are enabled or not in the first place as well. All of these different environments are built, those policies are enabled. If you want, you can disable them as well. And then you can see what are the top 3 risky users. You can also see, like, if you want to drill down into what are those users doing, we give all of the information about their user, email, ID information. We also give information, okay, what's the activity being performed? So this is bulk activity. The description makes it typically very easy. We do say, like, this person downloaded 1 TB. Typically, they download 12 MB. If we have done some false positive, you can also give that. Or if you feel it's not intuitive, you can provide some sort of feedback inline as well. So that way our model evolves even further in order to get improvements, if you may. And then last but not the least, we create these incidents as well. If you want, you can focus for a particular incident as well to say which situation do you want to focus on. Let's say you might say, I want to focus on a particular thing. You can do that as well. And then you can also export or download all of these incidents from the product. So that way you have visibility into all the different information that's getting consumed from the product. Hopefully that was a quick, good demo to walk you through that. Next slide, please. We'll try to go through this slide quickly now. I think, Kuram, you might need to click outside of the demo to sort of go to next slide. Perfect. So Microsoft data labeling. So this is another feature that we released. Microsoft has this feature called as Microsoft Information Protection. MIP labels is what they call it. This essentially helps in making sure that you are able to classify your information. So most of our customers, they've already invested in coming up with labels with the Microsoft environment. And they're asked from us is, hey, can I reuse those existing labels and then apply them to the documentation based on the classification from Palo Alto Networks. So let's say some end user might update the label on a file to say, this is a public information, but we detect extremely sensitive information in that. So we might come back and say, oh, this should not be public. This should be highly confidential. And then we can go ahead and apply those labels to the customer's environment. Next slide, please. I think this might have more build-up, so you can skim through that quickly. Yep. Next slide. Again, at a very glance, this is how let's say if you have an Excel sheet, the sensitivity section within that Excel sheet is essentially what's applying the label. These are the different labels. Again, you can configure them within MIP, and then this is how it would show up to end users. And what we are seeing is end users typically end up either misclassifying information or not classifying it correctly, is what we have seen happen with our customers' environment as well. Next slide, please. These labels are, again, there to ensure that we classify the data so that it gets handled properly, right? It's all about those downstream services as well. Sometimes you might be sharing information outside your organization. Sometimes you might be downloading things. You just want to make sure that those labels or those tags go along with the files so that information gets handled accordingly. Next slide, please. And you can also configure priority so that way you know the most sensitive information is handled appropriately versus the least sensitive information where you may or may not even care about some of these lower priority labels. Next slide. The typical use cases that we see, again, they're boiled into 3 different buckets. You want to perform some sort of access control. So that says if the file is labeled blah, make sure that access is restricted only to a particular environment. That sort of extends to firewall controls as well. You can say if the file have a particular label, make sure that you don't allow this file to leave the environment at all so that you're blocking that exfiltration in the first place. You might also want to monitor activities or audit logs within your Office 365 environment to make sure that those files are not getting released outside those environments. Next slide. In terms of licensing, again, what we are seeing is Microsoft performs its own labeling, if you may, using the e-file license, but we have seen some sort of false positives as well. For our product to work, you don't need E5. You can have E3 as well. E3 at least allows you or gives you basic access to Microsoft Purview. So if you have E3 or higher, you should be able to leverage this feature in order to make sure that we can perform those labeling to your documentation. And then next slide, very quickly, how does the workflow work? Again, labels get created within your Microsoft environment. So you're constantly creating labels within your Microsoft environment. We pull those information or labels using APIs on our side. You create policies within our data security. And you can say, based on the sensitive information being detected in those files, you can say, if this file has, let's say, PII data, label this file as PII. And then what we do is whenever we detect such files with that sensitive information, and if the policy says that it needs to be labeled, we perform an API call back to Microsoft Office 365 to say, hey, label this file as PII sensitive. So that's sort of the end-to-end workflow in this particular case. Next slide, please. I think that brings it towards the end. Wanted to make sure that we at least leave 14 to 15